Robert T. Wilson, I guess, would be described as not your typical musician or creative person in the music arts because his background is very different from music. But we'll talk to him about how that plays into his current vocation, if you will. And so we welcome to Buzz Moncton Robert T. Wilson.
Yeah,
Robert,
thank you. Thanks for the invite.
Thanks for joining. Yeah. So your brand of music, we must say right off the top, is it is different. It's experimental.
Yes.
It is very electronic, but not in what we're maybe more used to when we think about electronic music, like dance beats and all the rest of it. So where does your passion for what you create come from?
Well, actually, as a child, I grew up in the UK, and electronic music for a while in the 70s was like, when I was a child, it was like the soundtrack to the future is what I like to call it. And the music sounded so otherworldly and so different and exciting and new compared to like what was going on at the time, like stuff like punk rock. And then I was like I think 11 or 12, and I first heard Jean-Michel Jarre, a French musician. Yeah. And then punk rock happened, and then the guy who kind of was like the lightning rod would have been about 1979. There was a guy called Gary Newman that everyone knows from this song Cars. He was like a one-hit wonder in North America. But for me, it was like a blend of like the punk, the new wave, using synthesizers instead of using guitars. And then once I got a little older, like I realized like if I wanted to make music myself, like doing it with a band, I've tried that before and it didn't really work out because I'm not a very accomplished musician, with dexterity wise. Like I can't play guitar, I can play bass, maybe if it's one note. Drums I'm not very decent at. But with synthesizers, I found you could literally be a one-man band, and especially nowadays with stuff like Ableton and Pro Tools, you can basically be on your kitchen table making these fantastic like soundscapes. So what I did was I kind of embraced the 70s style like prog rock, these long ethereal like soundscapes with like the 90s beats that I mentioned. I'm wearing my Rolling 909 t-shirt here. I kind of like a hybrid of that. I like these kind of spatial soundscape voyages, like with scattered or like kind of sprinkled with drum beats or percussions. And like my children actually are some of my biggest critics. I asked my youngest one, I said, so how does this sound? I put the headphones on her. And she says, well, it sounds like I'm flying in a canyon on Mars, and she's like 8 years old. Or she says, I feel like I'm flying through a spaceship in space. And I'm like, that's exactly what I'm looking for. I'm kind of trying to channel that 70s optimism where we all thought the future was going to be fantastic and chrome and disco. And then also with a little smattering of the modern style, like the drum beats. But it's not the same as stuff like, my music's definitely not in the same ilk as like say Skrillex or some of the other stuff like dubstep or like hardcore techno. Right. It's more of like an ambient like kind of bent or lean to it. So.
Yeah, and it does have some healing qualities too, from what I understand. Something that you do connects with a healing property somewhere along the line.
Yeah, like I couldn't figure out a way to describe it to people, and the best way to describe it to one of my therapist was, I said, it kind of puts me in a different headspace. Like, unfortunately, I have an anxiety-based stress disorder, so I take medication for that. But I did find that whenever I was playing with my synthesizers or my drum machines, strange things would happen. Like, I'd sit there and I'd say, okay, it's 9 o'clock, kids are in bed, I'm going to make some music, and I put my headphones on, I have a cup of tea, and then I'd go to sip my cup of tea and it's stone cold. I'm like, what the heck? And I look at the clock, it was like midnight. So I'd literally get lost in the music. I know it sounds cliched and kind of trite when people say that, but that's what would happen. So I thought, man, maybe there's more to this music than just making like beats and becoming famous, because that wasn't really my intention. And if I'd got zero recognition, I'd still be sitting at home making these soundscapes or these like, soundtracks to the future, like on my kitchen table. But the added benefit is now this message kind of got out that the electronic music helps me out. So I've got a lot of contacts and a lot of like feedback from people who've had similar troubles, who are asking me advice, like because I use hardware mostly as opposed to software. So sitting there twiddling the knobs or moving the buttons and all this stuff on my devices. I don't know if it's the tactile sensation that does it, but it seems like it's very therapeutic. So okay. I wholeheartedly recommend it if you're into music at all, like to actually do it. And I never understood when I didn't make music how a musician could just sit there and play. Like I have a friend who's a fantastic guitarist, and he'd say, oh man, the other day I had a great session, I played for like 4 hours, had a great time. And I'm like, well, did you record anything? He's like, well, no, I didn't. I was just playing for me. And I never understood that until I did it myself. And like I said, there's been times where, it's been 3 or 4 hours, I've just kind of flown by. And whether I've recorded it or not, it doesn't really doesn't really matter. It's almost like it's the voyage is part of like the healing process, and it just strikes a chord in me. I mean, I'm just lucky that it's this ambient music. I mean, if it had been like death metal or punk rock, I think it would be a little different. But I mean, I'm just kind of lucky that the stuff that I play kind of just strikes that chord in me. I don't know why it does, but it just does.
And it does for other people, obviously.
Yeah, and other people too. Like, and it's actually that's I think out of all this, the way this all works, that's the most flattering thing for me is the fact that I make this music, and I get like messages from. I got one from a guy in Poland just today, and he was like, "Hey, I saw your music; it's really good. Like, da 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 da. Do you have any recommendations?" You know, I get emails from people from like Japan. Europe seems to be really popular because I grew up in the UK, so I have lots of friends in the UK.
But they would be more open to what you're doing. They're a little less penchant on what's popular, right?
I think so too.
More of an open mind, I guess, is what I'm trying
Europeans
to say.
I find in general are very like open-minded, like especially the people from like Germany. I get lots of emails from people like Germany and Spain, which I believe right now are like the electronic capitals of Europe. Like Berlin's really big, Barcelona has a big festival too. So, but the thing is, so now with the modern era, it's long gone past the time when cassette tapes and records were the media. Now with the internet, I mean, I can make a track and put it up on the internet and say, here's the link on my Facebook page or Twitter or what have you. And then all of a sudden, like within a day, it's got like 100 views, and I can track the views, and they're from places, like I said, like Estonia, Germany, the UK, America. And it's kind of cool. But I do find you're right. The Europeans seem to be a lot more open-minded to the different style of music, and I think they always have been. Like I said at the beginning, like Jean-Michel Jarre was this French synthesizer wizard, and around that time frame, there's lots of European music that kind of, like for want of a better phrase, invaded the UK.
Well, Kraftwerk is the one that always
That's right.
comes to mind.
Kraftwerk, the tip of everyone's tongue.
Yeah.
And then you got the disco stuff. You got stuff like Donna Summer was produced by George Moroder.
Right.
You've got like Boney M, which everyone knows around Christmas time.
Yeah.
So all this crazy electronic music, like kind of. Literally, like I said, it kind of invaded everything, and it was really cool. So yes, I mean, and I remember as a kid, it's funny you mentioned Kraftwerk. When I was a child, I was a teenager, I loved Kraftwerk, but for some reason I had the records, and I found their music was too slow. So I used to play their 33 records at 45 because it had a better beat. But now I listen to them, I say, what was I, like some sort of Philistine ruining their good music? So,
No, we did that over here too, actually.
did you?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. Well, it just seemed like I'd seen more up tempo and like more disco. But
Well,
then now I
yeah.
listen to it and it's like, oh, it does sound good at 33.
It kind of depended on the party sometimes.
That's right, yes, that's right.
But I don't want to let you go, and we only have a short time here, without touching on how all this led to your first album release a few months ago.
Yeah, what happened was I'd done a few EPs and a few tracks. There was a Canadian label called Low Noise Productions. He was the guy that kind of got me started. He's from Moncton, actually, Jason Pelletier. And he was asking a local guy who knows everybody, Mark Bones LeBlanc, if he knew anyone who played local music. So anyways, he said, yeah, I just met this new guy. He just showed up at one of our meetings, and he plays good music. So I put a track out with him, a track out with another compilation. Another guy said, hey, I heard you make some interesting music. That's not the norm. Do you want to donate some tracks? So I started donating some tracks, and I met this gentleman called Nick Smith. He's a young guy, he's a musician, he lives in Montreal, but he's from Moncton. And he has a label that is I don't know what the correct term would be, I guess it's a tape label. What it does is they make cassette tapes with a digital download. So he's like, hey, what I'd like to do is some of your little more different stuff, would you be interested in releasing it with us? I said, yeah, sure, like what do I have to do? So he said, well, just when you've got some tracks made up, send them to me, and then we'll see what we think. I said, okay, perfect. So I waited about maybe it was a year, and I said, hey, I've got a playlist of stuff you like. I said, here's, I think it's 10 tracks. I said, here's 10 tracks. Let me know which ones you like. And so the next morning I wake up and there's a message. It's all, hey, man, how do you feel about releasing all 10? I said, really? I said, well, that's more than I expected. I was expecting like batting 500. I said, but 10 out of 10 sounds good.
10 out of 10.
I said, so what do you want to do? So what happened was, I had them mastered by a local gentleman, Paul Gauguin, who also records under Paranerd, and he works at the Postman Suite, or used to. I think the Postman closed. So he mastered them for me. So I had a sound engineer professionally do it, and then I sent him off the masters, and then he dupes his own cassette tapes, but he's very, very fastidious. The reason why there was a slight delay on my album actually was because the recording levels weren't what he wanted, so he redid it all from scratch. So even though he'd spent all this time doing it, he redid it. And so then he sent out promo copies of like one or two of the best tracks that he thought to all these college radio stations. And then I got a phone call from, I think it was CBC Fredericton wanted to talk to me. And I got an interview with a guy in Ottawa for, I think it was CKCU, a college radio station out there. And it's kind of, like I said before, it's immensely flattering that people like the stuff I do. I mean, like the the clickbait's like, well, I was an air traffic controller who uses music as therapy, which is nice, but it's also kind of cool that they kind of come for the air traffic controller who's healing himself, but they kind of stay for the music, right?
Well,
so
yeah, they appreciate the music.
That's
then.
right. You know, and so the music's once it got out there, like a few people called me, like I said, and then I'd noticed on some of these college radio stations, just for a goof, I'd click on the top results for the week, and it would say Robert T. I was like number 9 for like independent Canadian records for a week. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe it! All the pennies flying in.
Do you remember? Very good. And do you remember the artists that were around you in that number 9 slot? By just any chance? Did you happen to notice who was? Like, who were you competing with there?
There was they were mostly Canadian. Actually, Paranoid was one of them because we had a dual release. Because what happened was Nick wanted to do a Moncton release, and it just coincided that both of us had a release at the same time. Yeah. So Paranoid's album was number 10. I was number 9, and there was a band ahead of me from St. John. You guys can edit out their name if I'm not to say it. Their band name was, I think it was called Real Shitty, was their band name. Okay. They were kind of an alternative rock band. Okay. And then the other bands were guys I'd never heard of, but they were all Canadian content. 2 of them were French Canadian, and I think 3 of them were from out west. There's a lot of I think there's a lot of independent electronic music out west too, like around in Alberta. So there's 3 bands I'd never heard of. Right. So probably people like myself, but a lot of them were, I think 2 or 3 of them were duos, like a male guy, obviously, playing synthesizers, and then a female vocalist, the classic synth pop duo. So,
just before wrapping up, what is the name of the album, and where can people find it?
The name of the album is Spectrum, and I called it that because, well, for 2 reasons. One, it was kind of like a gamut. I wasn't sure what Nick was looking for, so I sent him like some ethereal tracks, some ambient tracks, and also some up-tempo, like more classical techno stuff. And so he liked it all, so it has everything from like, you know, the more techno-inspired stuff to like some more ambient, like kind of soundscapes. And like I said, it's called Spectrum. It's very colorful, you know, because I like colorful things. And it's on my Bandcamp page. It's robertt.bandcamp.com. And it's also on Port Vandelay Records. That's the label that Nick Smith runs, the tape label. I believe it's portvandelay.bandcamp.com.
Okay, right on.
But I bet you if you Googled my name, for some reason, like if you Google Robert T. Techno or Robert T. Air Traffic Controller, there'll be lots of hits on Google shows up now. It's actually kind of overwhelming, to be honest, but it's kind of cool too.
Right on. Robert T.
Yes, thank you very much.
On Buzz Moncton. Thanks so much for coming by, and
Excellent.
all the best to you. And keep sharing those stories about how people are, you know, positively affected by
I will.
by your music. That's really, really fascinating stuff. And there's a whole field now of research that's been, you know, ongoing with regards to that type of thing.
Well, yeah, like I think Roland donated like pianos and stuff, but like I said, they never had anyone do electronic music. And last year, Shelley Steves got a hold of me, and I was on a small little TV segment, and she said the same thing you did. She was expecting like 4 on the floor, like, you know, hardcore like techno music, and then when I played my stuff, she's like, "This is not what I expected at all. It sounds very." What was the term she said? She said, it sounds very liquidy. Your sounds are very textural and they kind of flow around the room. I said, well, that's kind of what I'm looking for. Something that's not the norm. And I don't even know what genre it is. Is it ambient beats or like, you know, I don't know, but I just enjoy it.
It's the Robert T. brand.
It's the Robert T.
That's
sound.
Exactly what it is. It's
yes.
unique and it stands alone. So
Excellent,
there it
thanks.
is. Thanks a lot. And check us out. Check Robert T. out and Bandcamp and all of that good stuff. And come back and see us more often here at buzzmoncton.com. Robert T. does tend to play from time to time at local festivals and such. And whenever we have those listings, you'll find them on our listings as well. So, all right. See you next time at buzzmoncton.com.
Thanks a lot.
Power to the people.
That's right, yes.
Right on.